Hello, everyone. Unit 8, Lesson 6. We're going to be working with the quadratic formula, which is one of the formulas that is given to you on the reference sheet at the Regents. It would be nice if you memorized it, okay, but I'm not going to force you to because they do give you the formula. The quadratic formula gives you a similar answer to that of when you complete the square. So we're going to do a little review of completing the, because that might possibly be on your Regents exam. So we have to remember how to do that in case they ask us to specifically complete the square. So when you're completing the square, remember you start out with your x first, this sign comes down, and then it's squared. Okay? So you have x minus something squared. So what is squared is the b term. Okay? It's going to be squared after you take half of it. So what we do is we do the b divided by 2, which is 3. And then we're going to square that. Okay? What happens when we square it, so we have x squared minus 6x, and then we leave a space, and then there's your plus 1 and another space, and it equals 0. Since it equals 0, we're going to keep everything on the left side. So like I said, we did the b divided by 2, and then we square it. So since we added 9, we have to subtract 9 to make sure that it's balanced. So this right here is your x minus 3 squared. And then when you combine these two, you get minus 8 equals 0. So if you went further and we're solving for x, you would bring the 8 over. So then I would have x minus 3 squared equals 8. Then you would do square root of both sides, square root. So I have x minus 3 equals plus or minus 2 root 2. When you simplify that, root 8. Then bring the 3 over. I have x equals 3 plus or minus 2 root 2. Okay? And that's using your completing the square. It's fairly easy to complete the square when the a term is 1 and this value is an even number. Makes it real easy to do. But of course, they're not going to do that. They're going to give you an odd number, or they might give you a leading coefficient that you have to factor out. Okay, so there's a lot of things to consider when you're completing the square. Whereas with the quadratic formula, you are looking at the quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, and it doesn't matter what your a, b, or c are. You simply plug into the formula. Now, if we wanted to use the quadratic formula shown above from the equation exercise 1, you would identify your a is 1, your b is negative 6, and your c is also 1. And then you just plug it in. So negative 6 plus or minus square root of negative 6 parentheses squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? Some things you got to watch out for. You got to watch out for this right here. If you have a negative of a negative, it's going to be positive. This value right here, it's going to be squared. So remember, whenever you square it, it's going to be positive. Okay? So what we have is we have 6 plus or minus the square root. Now, all you need to plug in your calculator is just what's underneath the radical. So if you wanted to use that negative 6, make sure you leave it in parentheses, you square it, negative b squared, and then you have minus 4 times a times c. Enter, and you get 32. Okay? So then we have 32 all over 2. 32 breaks down to, and this is what we did some radicals previously, 32 breaks down to the square root of 16, square root of 2. So it's 6 plus or minus 4 root 2 all over 2. And you can only cancel if you can take out of every single term, and I can. So I end with a 3 plus or minus 2 root 2, which is the exact same thing that we got up there. Okay? And that quadratic formula will work all the time. Here's another example. Identify your a is 1, my b is negative 10, my c is 20. So I have negative 10 plus or minus the square root of negative 10 squared minus 4a over 2a. Oh, and a is 1. Okay? So when you plug it in your calculator, again, parenthesis, negative 10, get out of there, squared minus 4 times a times c. Okay? Enter, and you get 20. So go back here, and we have 10 plus or minus root 20 all over 2. Root 20 breaks down to 4 times 5, 2 root 5. 10 plus or minus 2 root 5 all over 2. Cancel, cancel, cancel. And we end up with 5 plus or minus root 5, which is choice number 4. Okay? So the key thing again, be very careful underneath the radical. Be very careful there, especially with a double negative. Okay? A lot of review here too. Okay? Solve the quadratic equation by factoring. All right, so my a term is greater than 1, so I'm going to do a little review of arcing for you. So there you have. Sometimes people are getting in trouble because they're not showing all the steps. You miss a step, chances are you're going to get something wrong. Negative 12. So how do I get an 11 from negative 12? 12 times negative 1. So what happens is, remember, the 2x squared comes down, the negative 6 comes down. Plus 12x minus 1x. Because that's how I get this, 11x. Group the first two, group the second two. Take out a 2x, x plus 6, take out a negative 1, x plus 6. Then I have x plus 6, 2x minus 1. They both equal 0. And you want to solve. So set them both equal 0. I get negative 6 and 1/2 when I set them equal to 0. Okay? Solve by the quadratic formula. All right, you should get the same answer. All right, so I have negative b plus or minus a square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? Go to your calculator. 11 squared. Do not put it underneath the radical. Minus 4 times a times c. Enter. You get 169. Now you'll notice if you get a perfect square, that means it's factorable. Okay, that's why we're able to factor it. Negative 11 plus or minus square root of 169 all over 4, which then goes to negative 11 plus or minus 13 all over 4. Okay? Now, you have to go as far as you can if you have a perfect square. So it becomes negative, oops, what did I do? Negative 11 plus 13 over 4, negative 11 minus 13 over 4. Okay? So that's how you get all these values. And then this will equal, what do we get here? 2/4, which is, there's your 1/2, and then negative 6. Okay? So it gives you the exact same answer. Exercise 5. We have a few of these to do. Yeah, what do we have to do here? We're going to solve each by the quadratic formula. Okay? So I'm going to move here. Okay? Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Again, you just put what's underneath the radical in your calculator. Turns out to be a 1. So you have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 1 over 6. So then you have negative 5 plus or minus 1 over 6. You have to find both of them. Negative 5 plus 1 over 6. Negative 5 minus 1 over 6. Okay, you get a negative 1 and a negative 2/3. Okay? So because that was a perfect square underneath the radical, you could have factored it. But if they specifically ask you one method to use, then that's the method you have to use. Okay? Now here's b. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? So then this is positive, so that becomes an 8 plus or minus the square root of, put that all underneath your calculator, or in your calculator, 12 over 2. Okay? 12 over 2 gives you 4 times 3, 8 plus or minus 2 root 3 all over 2. Cancel, cancel, cancel. 4 plus or minus root 3. Okay? And these just get progressively more difficult. Okay? What I'd like you to do, all right, since I think this is review, do C and D to hand it. Okay? So you're going to grab a piece of paper and you'll do C and D when you come into class. All right? Okay, if you need to review, rewind it, back it up, try it. It's just plugging in and being very careful. All right, I'll see you in class.